Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're strapping on our time-traveling boots and heading back thousands of years to explore those awesome ancient civilizations.
Awesome is right. I'm excited to dig into these questions and notes you've got. It's going to be like solving an ancient mystery one clue at a time.
Love that. And we'll be uncovering some seriously fascinating stuff. Think early humans figuring out tools, then empires rising and falling, and even those early writing systems that still influence us today. It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
Absolutely. It's amazing how much we can learn from those who came before us. Their ingenuity and resilience really laid the foundation for so much of what we know today.
So true. Let's jump right in with a question that takes us way back. What were those early humans, like the ones who appeared millions of years ago, using to survive? I'm talking about the ape-man era around 5 million years ago.
Okay, so picture this. Vast landscapes, early humans facing all kinds of challenges. Their survival depended on adapting and innovating.
Right, they had to be resourceful.
Exactly. And around 2.6 million years ago, we see the Old Stone Age, the Paleolithic period, begin. One of its defining features was the use of Oldowan tools.
Oldowan tools. What were they exactly? Were there like ancient hardware stores back then?
Not quite a hardware store, but the ingenuity is definitely there. Oldowan tools, sometimes called Oldowan or struck stone tools, were mainly made by hitting one stone against another to make a sharp edge.
Makes sense. I guess you got to work with what you've got, right?
Right. Imagine the skill it took to chip away at a stone and make a tool that could cut meat or scrape hides or even dig for roots.
Wow, that's pretty impressive for our early ancestors, using stones for so many different tasks. Really shows how long humans have been innovating, doesn't it?
It really does. These simple tools were a huge step forward in human evolution. They show our ancestors' problem-solving skills and their ability to adapt. And get this, they used these tools for a really, really long time.
Hold on, how long are we talking here? Millions of years.
Yep. You're looking at roughly 2.6 million years ago to about 12,000 years ago for the Paleolithic period. That includes the ape-man era, and even later hominids like Neanderthals who actually had even more advanced stone tools.
That blows my mind, millions of years with those stone tools.
Yeah.
So what finally changed things? Did they just suddenly decide to switch things up?
It probably wasn't an overnight decision, but you're pointing to a major turning point. About 12,000 years ago, we enter the new Stone Age, which we call the Neolithic period.
Okay, the Neolithic, a new Stone Age. What made it new?
This era was all about a huge shift in how humans lived, and it all came down to one groundbreaking thing: agriculture.
Agriculture, you mean like farming?
You got it. Imagine humans going from hunting and gathering to actually growing their own food and domesticating animals.
That's massive. No more chasing your dinner, you can just grow it.
Exactly. And this led to settled life, the development of villages, and new tools like polished stone tools, or the sea in Japanese. These are even more efficient than their earlier versions, showing just how much more sophisticated humans were becoming.
So farming really was a revolution. Changed how they lived, where they lived, the tools they used. Amazing how one big idea can completely change a whole civilization.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And as humans started settling down, something truly remarkable started to emerge. But I think we'll save that for after a quick break.
Okay, we're back and ready to explore Mesopotamia. This legendary cradle of civilization. I've always loved that phrase. But why does Mesopotamia get such a grand title? What makes it so special in history?
Well, Mesopotamia's fame comes from a few things. It's got this prime location between two big rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates.
Ah, those famous rivers. I've definitely heard of them.
Right. This region, they call it the Fertile Crescent, was like the ultimate breadbasket of the ancient world. Think about it, yearly floods, depositing all that rich, fertile silt.
Making the land perfect for farming.
Exactly. Large-scale agriculture was possible there, and that's huge for developing civilization.
Makes sense. But a good spot on the map doesn't build a civilization by itself, does it?
Definitely not. It takes people with ingenuity, innovation, a bit of that human spark. And that's where the Sumerians come in. They settled in Mesopotamia around 3000 BC and really made their mark on history.
The Sumerians, right. Weren't they the ones who invented writing? At least that's what I vaguely remember from school.
Your memory's spot on. The Sumerians were pioneers in writing. They developed cuneiform. It means wedge-shaped because of how they'd press a stylus into soft clay tablets to make symbols.
Clay tablets. That's so cool. Like an ancient iPad or something?
Sort of. It must have been a painstaking process, etching those intricate symbols onto clay. But they were preserving their knowledge and stories for us to find millennia later.
I know. It's amazing what they've uncovered from those tablets. What did they write about, by the way? Just everyday things, or...
Oh, so much more than that. We've learned about their religious beliefs, their math and astronomy, even their laws, all from these clay tablets. They're a real window into their world.
Laws. That reminds me, didn't they have some ancient law code? I'm thinking Hammurabi's code, but maybe I'm mixing things up.
You're close. Hammurabi comes a bit later. But the Sumerians did have a very sophisticated legal system. One of their big contributions is the Code of Urnamu, oldest known law code in the world, from around 2100 BC.
Wow, the oldest. What kind of laws did they have back then? Anything like what we'd recognize?
You'd be surprised. It dealt with property, inheritance, even punishments. Really gives you insight into their social structure and their values.
So they were already thinking about fairness and justice way back then.
Yeah.
Fascinating how these themes have been around for so long.
Absolutely. Shows the human desire for order, a just society. And while the Code of Urnamu is super interesting, it wasn't the only law code to come out of Mesopotamia.
Right. Hammurabi's code. That's the famous one, right? The eye for an eye code.
That's the one. Hammurabi was a Babylonian king, ruled in the 18th century BC. His code, it's inscribed on a giant stone slab, a stele, and it's known for being really comprehensive and for that lex talionis's principal retaliation.
Lex talionis. It's a bit intense. So it was a strict system of justice, huh?
It definitely emphasized retribution. The idea was punishments should fit the crimes. It's a concept that in some ways is still around today, although obviously much more nuanced.
I see, like the idea that actions have consequences. Makes sense. But aside from punishments, what else made Hammurabi's code so important?
It wasn't just about punishing people. It covered marriage, divorce, contracts, business, basically a whole lot of legal stuff. It was an attempt to write down and organize Babylonian law so they could settle disputes and keep things running smoothly in their society. Think about it, a written set of laws everyone could refer to, a big step toward justice and stability.
Wow, so Hammurabi was like the ancient world's super lawyer, creating the law of the land for an entire empire.
He definitely left a mark on Mesopotamian law. But it's important to remember Mesopotamia wasn't static. It was this dynamic region with so many cultures and empires rising and falling, each one shaping history in their own way.
I love that about this deep dive. It's not just dry facts and dates. We're hearing about the people who lived it, their stories, their innovations. It really comes to life.
Exactly. And while Mesopotamia has a special place in history, our journey through the ancient world's not over yet. There's another civilization just waiting for us to explore, one that's just as captivating and influential.
You mean Egypt? Pyramids, pharaohs, the whole 9 yards. Let's go. I'm ready to uncover the secrets of ancient Egypt.
Okay, we've left Mesopotamia behind, and now we're in ancient Egypt. It's like stepping into a whole different world. Pyramids, pharaohs, hieroglyphics. It's all so iconic. But let's start with the basics. What made Egypt such a powerful force back then?
Well, those pyramids are definitely impressive, but Egypt's power came from something even more fundamental. The Nile River. Remember that famous quote, "Egypt is the gift of the Nile." Herodotus said that. Oh yeah, the Nile. This is basically synonymous with ancient Egypt, right? But how did a river make them so powerful? It wasn't just for, drinking water, was it?
The Nile was so much more than that. Imagine this huge, fertile river flowing through the desert. Every year it would flood, leaving behind all this nutrient-rich silt.
Perfect for farming.
Exactly. It was the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. Not only did it provide water for drinking and irrigation, but it also connected the entire kingdom. Think of it as their highway system and their grocery store all rolled into one.
That's pretty efficient. But you need more than a river to build the civilization, right?
Yeah.
Who were the people who harnessed the power of the Nile and created this amazing culture?
Well, at the heart of it all was the pharaoh, a figure surrounded by mystery and power. Now, I'm sure you've heard of pharaohs, but do you know what their role really was?
To be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. I know they were powerful, but were they like emperors, gods, magicians?
Yeah, so some of them as god kings. They were considered divine intermediaries between the human world and the heavens.
Wow, god kings. That's a whole other level of power. Are there any famous pharaohs that we might recognize? Household names from ancient history.
Oh, absolutely. Egyptian history spans thousands of years, so there were a lot of important pharaohs. But to understand their stories, it helps to break down Egyptian history into different periods. Let's start with the Old Kingdom. That was from around 27 BC to 2200 BC.
The Old Kingdom, that's when they built all those incredible pyramids, right?
Yeah.
Just mind-blowing how they constructed those massive structures.
Exactly. The Old Kingdom is often called the Age of the Pyramids, and its capital was Memphis. This was the time of pharaohs like Khufu, the one who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
The Great Pyramid. It's hard to even comprehend how they built something that massive without modern technology. Those ancient architects and engineers were incredible. So what came after the Old Kingdom? Did they just keep building pyramids?
Pyramids were always important to the Egyptians, but things did change. After the Old Kingdom came the Middle Kingdom, from about 2055 BC to 1650 BC.
Okay, the Middle Kingdom. What was that era like?
During this period, power shifted to the city of Thebes. It was known for its amazing temples and its culture. The Middle Kingdom was a time of expansion, trade flourished, and the arts and literature really took off. It was a pretty stable and prosperous time.
Sounds like a good time to be alive. So what's next in our Egyptian history lesson?
Well, after the Middle Kingdom, you have the New Kingdom. This one lasted from around 1550 BC to 1069 BC. And it was a time when Egypt's power and influence really grew. Think military conquests, huge building projects, and of course, more powerful pharaohs.
So the New Kingdom was when Egypt really showed its strength to the world.
That's a good way to put it. One of the most famous pharaohs from this time was Akhenaten. He actually tried to completely change Egyptian religion.
Well, hold on. Change their religion? What did he do?
He wanted everyone to worship just one god, 810. It was a huge shift from their traditional polytheistic beliefs.
Trying to change a whole religion? That's a bold move. Didn't work.
His changes didn't last very long. But Akhenaten's reign is still super interesting because of the religious and cultural upheaval. The New Kingdom also had other powerful pharaohs like Ramses II, famous for his military campaigns and building projects, and Tutankhamun, whose tomb, discovered in the 1900s, revealed all sorts of incredible treasures and gave us a glimpse into the wealth and splendor of the ancient Egyptian royalty.
Oh, King Tut. That's the one everyone knows. Speaking of discoveries, what about the everyday Egyptians? What did they believe in? What were their lives like?
Religion was a huge part of life for the ancient Egyptians. They were polytheistic, believing in many different gods and goddesses. Each one had their own role and powers. Imagine living in a world where the gods influenced everything, from the sun rising to the Nile flooding.
So many gods. Were there any particularly important ones in their pantheon?
Ra was a big one. He was the sun god, and they believed he sailed across the sky every day in a boat, bringing light and life to the world. Osiris was also important. He was the god of the underworld, so he played a key role in their beliefs about the afterlife.
The sun god, the underworld. It's fascinating how their beliefs connected to their world and their hopes for what happened after death. Speaking of which, what about those elaborate burials and mummies? Why did they do all that?
Well, the ancient Egyptians believed that death wasn't the end, but a transition to another realm. And to make this journey, they believed it was super important to preserve the body.
And that's where mummies come in.
Exactly. Mummification was this complex process where they'd remove the organs, dry out the body with salts, and then wrap it in linen bandages.
It's amazing how much we're still fascinated by mummies today. Shows how important the afterlife was to them.
Absolutely. They also built these elaborate tombs, filling them with all sorts of provisions and treasures to make sure the deceased was comfortable in the afterlife. They even had a collection of spells and prayers, known as the Book of the Dead, to help guide them through the challenges of the afterlife.
Like a guidebook for the afterlife. They really thought of everything.
Yeah.
So we've covered their gods, their beliefs about death, their incredible pyramids. But what about their writing system? Didn't they use picture writing?
Yes. The ancient Egyptians developed a very unique writing system. We call it hieroglyphics. It's this beautiful combination of symbols representing words, syllables, and sounds.
Hieroglyphics. I always think of it as like ancient emojis. But seriously, what do they write about using hieroglyphics?
They documented everything. Religious texts, royal decrees, even everyday life. Hieroglyphics give us a glimpse into the richness of their culture.
It's just incredible how these ancient civilizations created such sophisticated ways to communicate and share their knowledge.
Really shows the power of human ingenuity. And speaking of ingenuity, the ancient Egyptians were also way ahead of their time when it came to, well, time itself.
Oh, what do you mean?
They developed a solar calendar with 365 days divided into 12 months.
Just like our calendar today.
Pretty close, right? It's incredible how they were able to track the sun and the seasons so accurately. It shows just how connected we are to these ancient cultures.
I know, it really makes you think. So much of what we take for granted today has its roots in those ancient civilizations.
It's true. Their innovations still influence us today. And while we've spent a lot of time talking about Mesopotamia and Egypt, it's important to remember that there were many other fascinating cultures in the ancient world, each one contributing to our shared human story.
That's what I find so fascinating about these deep dives. It's not just about learning facts and dates. It's about exploring the whole tapestry of human experience. The successes, the innovations, the struggles, and the lasting legacy of those who came before us.
It's a reminder that we build on the foundations laid by those who came before us. Even in our modern world, full of technology and advancements, we're still connected to their creativity and ingenuity.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the Stone Age to the rise and fall of empires. What an amazing journey through time.
And now, dear listener, we leave you with a question to ponder. If you could travel back in time to one of these ancient civilizations, which one would you choose, and why?
That's a great question. And on that note, we wrap up another deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that curiosity alive.